In April 1945, Berlin was a city being strangled to death as the Red Army closed in from all sides. Entire districts were flattened, food was scarce, and what remained of the German army and the Volkssturm, composed of old men and boys, fought street to street, house to house, in brutal urban warfare. Amid the artillery, however, another sound drifted through the smoke. Music. Wagner, Bruckner, and Beethoven all played as the city burned. These were the sounds of Gotterdammerung, the twilight of the gods. Before the war, Berlin was a capital of art, a city of music, opera, and excellence. For the Nazis, this beauty became a political tool. Wagner's gods and heroes weren't just myths, they were musical propaganda, marching to the rhythm of a dream that demanded blood, performed even as the war turned against Germany. By 1945, in Berlin, that propaganda had turned inward. Music no longer inspired conquest. It was a means of denial, a way to pretend that their new world order still existed while the end was fast approaching. On April 12, 1945, the Berlin Philharmonic held what would be a final surreal concert of the war. Outside, Soviet shells were already falling on the suburbs. Inside, the audience, dressed in their best clothes, in defiance of the disaster that awaited them. The conductor, Leo Brockhard, led the orchestra through Wagner's Gotterdammerung, Brahms' German Requiem, and Bruckner's Eighth Symphony. Gotterdammerung, the twilight of the gods, the tragic conclusion of the epic saga about power, betrayal, and the downfall of the world. Albert Speer engineered a move for the musicians to Beirut, but they chose to remain with their Berlin audiences until the end. Their final concerts were given by candlelight under bombing, with the Hitler Youth reportedly offering exiting members of the audience cyanide capsules for private use. It seemed as though the orchestra was now playing a funeral march for the entire nation. Many in the audience would soon take their own lives, be killed in the battle, or later be hanged for war crimes. It was the last performance in the heart of the Third Reich. Hermann Göring said years earlier, quote, "If we win, we will go down in history either as the world's greatest statesman or its worst villains," end quote. For the Germans who followed in this vision, this was the end of their world. As the battle for Berlin began, the city became an orchestra of destruction. Beneath the ruins, music still played. Hitler sat surrounded by damp concrete in fear. On a battered gramophone, Wagner's Rienzi spun its final notes, the story of a hero who destroys himself. It seemed he was reaching the final act of the opera he had written for the world. It is rumoured that Hitler whistled the Disney tune "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf" as he shuffled around the bunker in his final days. While Hitler brooded below, the chancellery above was alive with a desperate energy. In the marble halls, the last loyalists drank, danced, and laughed beneath the chandeliers that trembled with every artillery hit. Goebbels' aides brought out the wine and the gramophones, and the secretaries, exhausted and terrified, waltzed with SS officers to the sounds of old records. One adjutant later recalled it as, quote, "a dance to the end of the worlds," end quote. Two worlds, one pretending Germany still existed, and the other waiting for it to die. Before the end, there was to be one last song. In the bunker's narrow halls, the Goebbels children sang old folk songs, lullabies, and hymns to the Führer. Their innocent voices drifted through the stale air. Hitler sat by, listening quietly and intently. Hours later, Magda Goebbels wrote a final note saying, "Our children are too good for the world that will come." That night, she gave each child a sedative. Then, one by one, she placed cyanide between their lips. The last song they shared had become their Requiem. When Hitler killed himself on April 30th, the German radio did not announce it immediately. First, they played Bruckner's 7th Symphony, the same music performed at Wagner's funeral. Then afterward came the announcement, the Führer has fallen in battle for Germany. For Berlin civilians, music became a final comfort. In the ruins of apartments, people dragged pianos into cellars, play for loved ones, or just for themselves. One Soviet officer wrote later that as his unit entered the city, they could hear the sound of Chopin drifting from basements. When the fighting ended in May 1945, Berlin was unrecognizable. More than 100,000 civilians were dead. The city was reduced to a bombed-out shell. But the music survived. Within months, musicians performed again, first in rubble, then in makeshift halls. In a city of ashes, art returned before real order. It was no longer propaganda. It was a way to prove, mainly to themselves, that Berlin's soul had not died with their regime. In the final days of the Reich, the line between art and war blurred into a delusional requiem mass for the city. In Wagner's Gotterdammerung, the gods perish in fire, their world consumed by the flames they created. In 1945, it was much the same in Berlin.